architect Siddarth. Can we all do it all together? Come on, everyone.
So, thanks for the introduction. I think wonderful to have you all here. So, I'll just give you a small brief. So, KSM is a Chennai-based architecture firm. We're about 34 years old. And we're talking about architecture and the environment. I think it's more to do with sensitivity to the environment that we're really talking about here. And a lot of our thinking, I'll just keep flipping through so you can keep seeing what we're talking about. A lot of what we're doing in the kind of architectural thinking and depth of work that we are talking about, a lot of it is very common sense driven. Because I think there is a need to understand that only 5% of all buildings built in the world or in our country is actually designed by architects. So very few buildings actually are designed by architects, and not everybody has the chance to get a LEED certification, get an environmental designer, and so on. So I think as young professionals, I think one thing that you have to keep in the back of your mind is that we need to think through the basics first, the commonsensical part of it first, because nothing in sort of culturally or architecturally, none of these things that we're really talking about or addressing is beyond common sense. So, this is just a slide to just lighten it to start with. The reality is that climate change is real. Like I said, unless we address it from a very grassroots level, where every building, the building at the end of your street, in your town, in your locality, has to have a similar sensitivity to the environment. Because one thing I'll tell you, as a society in India, I think we are probably one of the most environmentally sensitive communities. We don't let lights run on in our house. We don't let water run off on the taps. We don't waste food. So as a society, we are extremely conscious. We're extremely careful about how much of resources we use, the resources that we waste. So how does architecture respond to those kind of sensibilities that are already a part of our culture? So what I'm going to do today is very quickly, I'm just going to run through 3 of our projects, and I'm just going to show you how the thinking sort of evolves for different typologies, and how that thinking sort of translates into something that is very tangible, very doable, in terms of making your building a little bit more sensitive to the environment. So the first project is a project called The Quest. It's a learning center in Chennai. It's located it's a seaside location. It's off the coast of Chennai, just about 100 meters away from the coast. And a very small site. It's only about 540 square meters in terms of site area. So the first thing we do, as architects, as all of you, as students, as you're learning in your institutes, and as young practicing architects, the first few things we always look at is climatology. So the study of, where's the wind blowing from, and where are the hotter zones, and so on. And most of India, I think Bombay, just because you're on the other side, you're on the west coast, it's slightly different from we're on the east coast, so it's slightly different on our side. But in principle, the climatology for most of the southern part of India is probably the same. So the first thing we do is map the sun path. In the case of a learning center, you have to imagine students are there only between morning and a stipulated time in the evening. They're not there throughout the day. So it's an activity that's used within certain duration of the day. So we sort of map where are the hot zones, where are the points of concern that we have in terms of temperature. And then we start working with, now we know broadly what the challenges are. So then we start working on sections, saying, what are we doing with the actual profile? What is the experience going to be like? Because in pursuit of environment, we shouldn't lose out the quality of space, the quality of environment that we're really talking about. So we start working out the section, which is the most important part of any architectural design. I'm sure you'll all agree that plan is there, but I think section is really where all the fun lies. So we talk about, are we creating public spaces for students at a lower level? Are we able to sort of stagger the section a little bit? Can we play around with levels? Can we allow that breeze to sort of flow through the space and sort of create an environment where I don't really need air conditioning? I don't really need the what do you call artificial lights, sort of like a room like this. It won't work without artificial lights. So you start developing a sensibility saying that, what, I know my east and west are a little challenged. I know my north and south, I can get a south breeze blowing in. I want to create this really interesting space and volume. I want the breeze to sort of funnel through this space. So if you start seeing it from a material point of view, this is just a corner of the building. So we start looking at the western wall. So the western wall, like you can see over here, obviously the western wall, everybody knows, is where all that heat sort of builds up from. So it is a composite wall. So what you're seeing as a photograph is bamboo shuttered GFRC concrete. So we've actually taken real strips of bamboo and we have used it as a shuttering material and we have created this GFRC panel. It's what we call a ventilated rain screen. So it is ventilated through and through, and it allows the water to sort of skirt past the back, but it is in many layers. You can see there is a blockwork wall behind, then there is insulation, and then there is another blockwork wall behind. So what are we trying to do really? We are really trying to say that this self-shaded bamboo element that we have on the outside and the multiple layers that you saw just behind it are essentially keeping all that heat out and trying to make sure that there is no penetration of that western heat into your space, automatically making the ambient indoor temperature much more digestible, much more, because you'd imagine, like Bombay, we are also very humid. So the second temperature goes up even 1 degree because of humidity, it will start feeling very, very stuffy. So temperature control, humidity control is something that's very important. So for humidity control, you need to let the breeze blow through. The second breeze blows across your skin, evaporation happens, you feel very comfortable. So those are all just the basics of how all of us, sit under a tree, you feel more comfortable than standing out in the sun. So the apertures along the western wall are all very, very small. So the whole idea is don't bring in too much of sun, don't bring in too much of heat, don't bring in too much of light from those two openings. But on the north and on the south, because we know those are all orientations where the sun is there pretty much throughout the day, we were looking at, breaking the sharpness of the sun. What is it that we are really concerned about is glare. Now, if you actually look at glare, like these lights shining into my face right now, it's uncomfortable because we don't like light in our eyes. So that is a perceived temperature. Now, all of us as human bodies, the one is absolute temperature and what is perceived temperature. So the second you have glare falling on your face, sort of spoiling your view of your laptop or your screen or your paper, it sort of irritates you and therefore you're uncomfortable. So it is not necessarily absolute temperature that we are concerned about. So we're saying, how do we break the glare? So we have these aluminum aerofoil shaped extruded elements as a sun shader to sort of just cut off the excess glare that you would have on the north and on the south, so that you'll have a kind of a light quality on the inside, which is very, very mellow, very, very soft. So if you move into the building, so the second you start moving inside, you start seeing that the space is fairly continuous. So all the way from outside, you can walk through the building, the ground starts to move up, it sort of leaks up to the upper levels where you have various other activities. You have spaces that connect from one volume to another volume, from an upper level to a lower level. Just starting to make it very, very open, very, very accessible. Students can come in at any point in time and sort of access that space. But when we're talking about sustainability, again, what I want to add over here is that there is no window covering. There are no blinds, there are no curtains, there is no false ceiling, there is nothing that technically will degrade, that will break and fall off, that I have to replace. I think somebody asked about, what is the life cycle of interiors eventually. So it does have a life. I mean, definitely it can't last as long as maybe a blockwork wall or as a concrete surface. But sort of echoing what they were talking about in terms of purity of design, purity of space. I think someone said Zaha, they've done very little. I think that's all you really need to do, honestly. I think the space is to do with how it catches light, how comfortable you feel over here. So you can imagine this space, there is no direct sun ever coming inside. It's bright. You always have access to landscape on the outside. The space feels airy. In fact, all the timber that you see on the shelves were actually used as shuttering material for the slabs. They've been then removed, cleaned, and have been used as shelving material. So again, just made it a little playful with colorful stairs. Again, stairs have been made in such a way that they're very open, transparent. They allow the light to sort of filter through, allow the breeze to filter through. It just gives you an idea of how simplistic the space might feel, but it has a great impact on how the space is actually used. To add to a fun element, we also exit the building. We have this wonderful spiral staircase, sort of mimics pencil shaving. So it exits the building at one point. Students can sort of have a fun ride all the way up to the uppermost level. So it's a very exciting and safe, I should add. It's a safe stair climb all the way up to the upper floor. And the upper floor has got, the topmost floor has got a concrete jack arch roof. It's a roof that's a fairly insulated roof, and it's made out of precast concrete battens. So again, a lot of our heat that comes from the roof. Tropical countries, obviously, we expect a lot of our heat. The sun is overhead, noontime. A lot of the heat comes in from the roof. So how do you insulate the roof? I think is very important, and this is how we have tackled it for this particular project. You can see the building in context. So you can see a very blanked off west and a very solidly blanked off eastern face. And you have your southern and your northern side sort of responding to the breeze and the sun movement and so on. Right. So that's just to give you a very, very, very brief idea of what our thought process would have been in that specific project where we started off with climatology. The other project I'm talking about right now is now a factory office. So over here, our starting point came about saying, what is the thinking in a factory office? Now, in a factory office, you have to imagine the work thinking is production. They're talking about what do you call it? About how many things have to be dispatched, how many materials are coming, and it's a fairly strenuous work environment. We visited the clients. This is the old factory that we visited, and in that factory, we found that they had tons of special plants like your succulents and cacti and so on, which were peppered all over the setback areas. So these are all some of the older pictures that we took from their existing facility. So what did we say? So we said, why don't we use all the landscape that they had? Let's start with landscape as the starting point. So we said, let's start with landscape and start creating maybe these gardens. Technically a garden kind of a space, but connect all these gardens with maybe one kind of a covered walkway. Right. So we said we'll connect this with spaces. So basically what are we talking about? We're talking about a space, very simple idea. Let's intersperse whatever activity that's there inside this office space along with your verandas and courtyards and so on. This is almost like a stock idea that any one of you could have thought of. So how did we go about it? So we said, this place, like Chennai is very popular for a very clay kind of soil. So you'll find a lot of rural areas, there'll be a lot of brick kilns all over the place where these country bricks are made. So we said, what if we remove the concrete roof element completely, make it something different, and we move to a kind of a jack arch, a brick jack arch structure. But we were not happy with the fact that you'll see all these beams, those supporting beams being seen below. So we said, what if we can push it up, sort of embed it into the brick arch structure? So that automatically gives you a much lighter sensation to the way the roof is perceived from below. So you see, they place a formwork below. the bricks are arranged on top. So you have to imagine how scary that is. You placing bricks on top, there's no cement, there's no mortar, there's nothing, and you have to pull that shuttering down. So it takes some real guts to stand over there when you pull that shuttering off, and that whole thing will come down, it'll make one crunching noise and just come down about 1 inch, and it'll hold its place. So basically it stays by pure friction. There is no cement, there is no concrete, there's nothing whatsoever in the installation of what we call a brick jack arch. So fundamentally, it's an edifice in brick. We have the floors in brick, we have cavity walls in brick, we have large overhangs. So these jack arches also sort of defeat gravity. They hang outside the building line. They create these verandas, well ventilated, keeps the heat out, because you're talking about almost about 400 millimeters worth of thickness above the flattest part of your jack arch. So it keeps the heat out, it's well ventilated. So what else do you want? So you don't have to run the AC 6-8 months in a year, which is quite crazy for a place like Chennai where it is really humid. So really worth coming and seeing. So again, it's like I told you, it's a story in brick. So it sort of reveals itself as you start walking into the space. So we have courtyards. All these plants were taken from the previous office. We just brought them here, identified which plants would go where, created a courtyard for every situation. You can see the factory behind. So there's an entry to the factory. Some of those openings that you see in the back are the access ways to get into the factory as well. So again, you're using sort of like a module. We're almost identified like a module, a grid, and we've just sort of played around with what do we remove, what do we put back, where do we keep it cut, where do we sort of create these courtyards and openings. So that you can see again, no false ceilings, no paneling, no window shades, no covers, but it is completely glare free. The space inside never really has to worry about having direct sun coming inside, because you know where the sun moves. The sun position, those sun path diagrams don't change. So if you are geographically where you are, at least in the near future, it's not going to change. So if you map it, then you can actually do away with, because there's no point in having an amazing view on the outside and saying, you know what, it's so hot, I need to put blinds down because I can't stand the glare. So you rather sort of strike a balance between, how your design responds to it in such a way that those views are enjoyable 365 days in a year, rather than saying, only in certain parts of the year can I use certain spaces. Even at night, I think the light sort of scallops quite interestingly on those spaces. We have a nice garden on the outside that they can look at. We have a set of trees on the outside, so whenever they have a kind of a factory gathering, they can sort of have a small party here. So it is in principle just a ground floor structure. It is just one large ground floor structure with the factory that produces what they produce directly behind, and completely done in brick. So this is one way of sort of passive response to an environmental requirement. So one thing in this project that I'd sort of maybe add in specific is, because we didn't do a structural concrete slab, we have saved almost about 70% of the concrete usage which would traditionally have been there for, this building is almost 66 meters long. So imagine if I had to do a concrete slab, 8 meter by 8 meter grid and so on, it'll have a tremendous amount of concrete usage. So it was an exercise in saying, can we reduce cement? Can we reduce CO2? So we've reduced almost about 50 tons of CO2 by not using concrete or cement concrete in this whole project. So the only cement and concrete is gone into foundations and all the brick mortars and those rib beams that are there in between. The last one I thought I'll talk about is our own studio. So I thought I'll keep the fun part for the last. Um, Here, I think the story of sustainability starts right from how did we choose? So we were not here before. I mean, the studio is only about 8 years old now. We were in a different part of the city. The sustainability story of for us specifically, because over here we were the designers, we were the clients, and we were the guys footing the bill. So all the things we had to sort of take care of very, very carefully when we were designing our office. Choosing the parcel of land close to a transport hub was something that was very important to us, because getting to a place of work is also part of the sustainability story. Because if I can easily choose a place that's miles away and say, you guys figure it out, but that won't work. So if I have bus, if I have metro, if I have suburban train networks, is there a way for people to sort of get to the place using public transport? Is also a part of sustainability. A sort of, like, I don't know, in the main hall there was a conversation going on about the 10 points of what is good livability in terms of a city. So I think architects also to a great extent have to play their role in terms of citing your site if you have the opportunity to choose a site. I mean, sometimes you're just given a site and may not be in the best place. So, I mean, our location, we are stuck between, there's a house, there's a small shop that sells food, we have a pharmacy, we have a bank. It's just a usual street you'd find anywhere in the country. We just had a few trees in our site. So here the program started off saying, we're architects, right? So, and it's our own space. So we get only one chance in our life to create our own space. So you want to go all out. So we started off by saying, inside we should have it like this. We all want to talk to each other. Lucky to have few of our guys from our office who are here also, so they'll really it's a fun place to be. If you've not been, if you're in Chennai, do come. We talked about light coming in, because see, we're giving this whole spiel about environment, light, and all of that. And if our own space doesn't really reflect it, you sort of feel like you're not done yourself enough service. So so we just went through that whole process of creating that space. And so on. Sorry, one sec. Let me just read this. Right. So from an interior point of view, you start seeing that again, most of the surfaces are very honest in their materiality. There's a lot of natural light filtering through. We have landscape sort of integrated with the interiors, wherever spaces can sort of be left bare. Steel is left as steel, floor is left as what it is, and so on and so on. So then over here we started saying we'll fix the interiors, we'll fix the program, and then we'll start identifying all our surfaces that we need to really address. So we're talking about south and we're talking about east. So we went to the bamboo curtain on the south side where we can get some privacy, we get a filtered light quality. At the same time, you start getting this kind of dust barrier kind of a situation that happens along the south and along the east, which is our wind direction. So the spatial quality is really quite interesting. Then we talk about west. So again, west and north, we were more concerned about how are we going to deal with the harsher side. But we just chose eventually to go up with a kind of a passion flower creeper, an evergreen creeper which loves the sun. So that is just a simple way of saying, we can actually cut down the heat on the western side by completely just growing something which is beautiful, which flowers, which gives you a nice aroma. So that is what we have done even along the northern side, where we have a jasmine creeper that sort of provides a sense of shade to those spaces. So none of our windows really need any kind of window covering or any kind of protection. Finally, the roof, which is a very technically designed roof, is essentially a roof that it's 450 millimeters thick. So it's got a 100 millimeter slab on the bottom, a 100 millimeter slab on top, and 250 millimeters of expanded polystyrene foam inside. It keeps the place extremely cool. You can go even at 3 p.m. and touch the bottom of the slab from inside, and you really don't feel the heat. So it's really down to sort of how you want to manage how your spaces work. We have wind catchers that sort of allow the cafeteria space to sort of breathe into your lower levels and so on. And that's what you get. So you sort of get a more locally relevant paradigm which sort of fits into the local environment, at the same time is quite exciting and sort of something that we really like to sort of use and enjoy. So I think we're running out of time, so I think that's all we have, yeah. Thank you.